I just watched episodes 1 through 100 of One Piece for the first time ever, and they were amazing. Well, some of them. Today we're going to be breaking down these first 100 episodes and what makes them so unique. However, I'm not going to break down each individual episode because that would take a very long time, so we're going to do them in groups of 10. So let's start with 1 through 10. Throughout these groups of episodes, I'm challenging myself to pick out one theme from each group, and for episodes 1 through 10, that theme is friendship. After we meet Luffy, he immediately befriends a character named Koby. We also meet another future main character of the series, Nami. Now, Nami doesn't know it yet, but Luffy had already decided that she was going to be a part of his crew. One thing I noticed in these first few episodes that is so different from the series later on is the pacing. The pacing of these first few episodes is so fast. We are flying through places, characters, everything. And going into this show, I knew pretty much nothing about the series other than it was about pirates, and I also knew that it had a ton of episodes, but other than that, that's pretty much it. The amount of animes I've watched is pretty low. It's probably less than 10, and I've decided to watch one of the longest, if not the longest one, so here we are. In episodes 2 and 3, we meet Zoro the pirate hunter, as well as one of the first main antagonists, Captain Morgan. In episode 4, we learn a little bit of Luffy's backstory, but then episodes 5 through 8, we meet another antagonist named Captain Buggy, and all of a sudden in episodes 9 and 10, we find ourselves in Usopp's hometown, Syrup Village. Now, I'm not even gonna lie. I watched the first 3 episodes one day, and it took me 3 weeks to watch another episode. I was so bored during these first 10. Even though the pacing was so fast, I was not enjoying the episodes, and I don't really have another reason other than boredom. But I stuck with it, and after those 3 weeks, I started watching more and more, and that led us to 11 through 20. I would say these 10 episodes go hand in hand with the first theme, and this theme is teamwork. We learn about Kuro and his plan to take over Syrup Village, so this is the first time we really get to see the Straw Hats work together, and we can already see the pacing kind of slow down from the first 10, because episodes 11 through 17 are based around Kuro. Compared to where we are jumping around every 2 to 3 episodes, I kind of like this pacing a lot better. And in this chapter, we gain another crew member named Usopp, and the last 2 episodes aren't really anything special. We end up on some weird animal island, we learn a little bit about Zoro's backstory, and then in episode 20, they set off for the Baratie. As a first-time watcher, I enjoyed these 10 episodes a lot more than the first 10. Maybe that's because the story had already kind of kicked off. I don't know. Those first 10 were very boring for me. And that brings us to 21 through 30. Which I'm just going to go ahead and call the Baratie arc. It's not really an arc, but it's a little mini arc in the series. We meet several new characters in this arc, one of them being Sanji and another being Don Krieg, an infamous pirate from the Grand Line. These 10 episodes have a recurring theme of sacrifice. With Don Krieg threatening to destroy the Baratie, it forces several people to put their lives on the line, all in order to protect the greater good. And despite being such a small setting, a lot of things happen. Nami manages to run away from the crew, Zoro almost dies challenging legendary swordsman Mihawk, and Luffy's fighting his toughest opponent yet. By the end of all that, on episode 30, we meet the 5th crew member of the Straw Hats, Sanji, who can now cook for the always hungry Luffy. My interest in the characters in the show continued to grow throughout these episodes, and I really enjoyed this little arc on the Baratie, and I feel like at this point I was finally starting to see all the hype around the show and why people really love this show. But now it's time to chase after Nami, which leads us into episodes 31 through 40. Moving on to Arlong Park, also known as Kokoyashi Village. I can really only describe these episodes in one word, and that's trust. First, we have Luffy putting his trust in Nami, and he never was doubtful of the fact that she wanted to be a part of the Straw Hats. So he puts his trust in her and that she didn't actually leave the Straw Hats, that she had some other motive for going, and he was right. And once Luffy learns the real reason Nami left, it leaves him very angry, and he gets his first taste of how unjust and terrifying some pirates can be. And I think at this point, Luffy really understands how much he hates these kinds of pirates. He kind of gives himself an inner moral that he will never stoop down to this level of pirates, I guess. But going back to trust, it is then time for Nami to put her trust into Luffy to defeat these pirates. And this scene was just the most beautiful thing I had seen in this show yet.
Please help me.
With the first episodes being build up and backstory, that leaves episodes 38 through 40 for kind of the beginning of the fight. For me, this was the turning point in the series. I enjoyed the Baratier arc, but the arc with the Arlong pirates is finally where I got fully immersed into the One Piece world. This is when I wasn't really just turning on the show when I was bored. I was wanting to watch an episode right after the next. I was hooked. So continuing where we left off in 31 through 40, 41 through 50 ends off the Arlong arc. These 10 episodes kind of bounce around a lot. We're kind of in that bouncing stage, but I've realized that's kind of a pattern. When they end off a fight with somebody, we kind of bounce around for a little bit until we get into the next mini arc. So we end off the Arlong arc, we say goodbye to Kokoyashi Village, we bounce around to Captain Buggy for 2 episodes, and then towards the end of this little chapter, the Straw Hats arrive in Log Town. But during these episodes, you can really see the unity that is starting to form on the crew. The Straw Hats are now united as a crew more than they ever have been before. We only got to see the last couple episodes in Log Town in this little chapter, but I was very excited to see what was going to happen. We were introduced to Smoker, who I think looks like the most badass character yet, and we also got to see this amazing little shot of Zoro when he was buying his swords. So that takes us to 51 through 60. Honestly, I thought the Log Town adventure was going to last a lot longer than it did, but they were really only there for a few episodes, and that's not a bad thing. I just assumed it was going to be a little bit longer, but even so, in these few episodes, a lot of stuff happened. Luffy was inches away from death, and he didn't have a care in the world. I mean, when does he ever have a care in the world? But that's when we were introduced to this mysterious force and this mysterious character, who I have no idea who he is. Remember, this is my first watch through, and I'm sure this is foreshadowed to something, but I have no clue who this guy is. I can't even think of somebody. I have no idea. The rest of the episodes in this little chapter are considered filler. The Straw Hats end up helping this little girl on this island named Warship Island, and although it's filler, in my opinion, this little filler arc was an amazing arc. We got to learn more about the world with this new island and this other secret island, as well as some of the creatures in this world, like the dragons. A lot of people like to skip filler when they're watching, but in my opinion, you should watch this little arc 10 out of 10 times, because we get to see so much personality and dynamic of the crew that we really hadn't seen yet, and it just really puts in perspective how close they've all gotten throughout their journey at this point. So it may be filler, but I believe this is definitely worth watching. Although, that leads us into 61 through 70, where the Straw Hats finally make their way into the Grand Line. I was beyond excited for this moment because the entire series, they had been slowly hyping up the Grand Line and all the things inside of it. And if it wasn't for my knowledge of the over 1,000 episodes the series has, I would have thought that the Grand Line was kind of like the final destination. Once they get to the end of it, that's the end of things. But with all the episodes, I don't think that's the case. We're introduced to a lot of new characters in this chapter, some of them being Miss Wednesday, Mr. Nine, Laboon, Crocus, and a lot of other Baroque Works members. We also go to our first island in the Grand Line, known as Whiskey Peak, and these episodes just speak out one word: adventure. The Straw Hats are finally in the Grand Line and are itching for adventure. But after a quick stop at Whiskey Peaks, the Straw Hats go on to the next island. However, we meet a new mystery character who seems just overpowered. I don't know. She destroyed a ship like it was nothing, and I don't even think her name was mentioned, but she works with the Baroque Works crew, I guess. So off to the next island, the Straw Hats actually picked up 2 crew members, Vivi, who was Miss Wednesday, and her duck. And let me tell you, at this point, I'm fully locked into this series. I am just watching episode after episode. The pacing had improved so much, and it really helped me get even more hooked than I already was, and I just really wanted to see where this story was going. So that brings us to 71 through 80, where we are in Little Garden, which in reality there really isn't anything little about it. We get our first look at some new species, giants and dinosaurs, so already just expanding the world that we know of One Piece. And I really enjoyed the backstory between these 2 giants and their honorable duel. That's another thing I've noticed with this series, is everybody has a backstory, and it's always something pretty interesting, just like Vivi and her duck. However, things weren't very nice for long. Baroque Works showed up and put their devil fruit powers to use, and at this point it seems like every 8 episodes or so the crew is just close to death. I've also noticed kind of a pattern occur in every single fight. Every single fight starts with Luffy losing in the beginning and then kind of figuring out what he should do to beat them, and then winning in the end. Either way, the Straw Hats barely make their escape and head to the next island, but my girl Nami is not looking too good. So that brings us to 81 through 90. where we end up on Drum Island, a winter island in the Grand Line. And it kind of works out perfectly. This little arc on Drum Island ends right at episode 90, so 81 through 90 are just all on Drum Island. And in these episodes, the Straw Hats faced a lot of adversity. The race against time with Nami was perfectly done. As a viewer, I had no idea if they were going to make it to the doctor in time, and I think it was perfectly executed. And this was kind of the first time we've experienced a race against time in the series, and it was done great. I have no complaints about this. And that's the thing with this show. I knew Nami probably wasn't going to die. I've noticed by now that not many people die. It's not a series where you have these unexpected deaths. But the way the show is written and the twists that happen, it makes you question what you're thinking and what you actually know. I know this isn't considered filler, but I think this arc would be fine if you just cut out all the fighting with Wapol, because all the fighting with him almost made me think it was filler. In my opinion, there was just no question that Luffy could beat these guys up. Like, they're not that strong, and they don't have any sort of trump card against them, but yet they're still kicking and screaming no matter what Luffy does to them. So if you just cut out the fighting with Wapol, I don't think you'd miss any context whatsoever, because the real reason of this little arc is to pick up a new member of the Straw Hats, a doctor named Tony Chopper. So the Straw Hats got their doctor, and that brings us to the close of 90 to 100. The last chapter of these first 100 episodes. And it's kind of crazy. Like, you look back, and it doesn't feel like you watched 100 episodes of One Piece, but you obviously did. You're here. You're at the 100 episode mark. And this little chapter is the start of one of the most interesting arcs yet, Alabasta. At this point, I felt like Vivi was a part of the crew, but now that they're in Alabasta, I think the time with the Straw Hats is coming to an end with Vivi, which I'm kind of sad about. We also get Smoker reintroduced throughout this. He shows up at Alabasta for whatever reason. But the main guy, I feel like, is going to be Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. It's kind of a shame these last 10 episodes don't have a ton of action. It's mainly just backstory, build up, and the introduction of these new characters. However, we do get to meet a family member of Luffy's, and at this point, I had zero idea Luffy had a brother. But we meet Fire Fist Ace. Now this guy is one cool looking dude, made of fire, and it's like the most overpowered devil fruit that we've experienced yet in the show. He starts traveling with Luffy for a little while, but he ends up leaving when they're crossing the desert. And after watching this, I'm not gonna lie, I immediately watched the rest of the Alabasta arc. I'm beyond hooked, and to be fair, if you watched 100 episodes of anything, you're definitely hooked. But still, overall, the first 100 episodes of One Piece were quite the adventure. The world building, character introduction, everything that happened was just a wild ride. One thing this show does so well is it gets you immersed into the story to the point where you can't wait to see what happens next. Like I said, I've watched some anime in the past, but I've never been immersed into the story and the characters as much as I am with One Piece. As a viewer, I'm thankful I'm only at the first 100, because I already have a feeling when I get to 1000 or the end, wherever it's at, I'm going to wish there was more episodes. This show has a way of lifting your spirits when you watch. If things weren't going well in the real world for me, the show is like a breath of fresh air. Once I started watching, every bad thought just disappeared. I'm going to be making this video at every 100 episode mark, so if you enjoyed this one, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you guys in episodes 101 through 200. Today we embark on a journey through the Grand Line. We've been to Whiskey Peak, we've been to Little Garden, Drum Island, but now it's time to put our big boy pants on, because we're headed to Alabasta. I did a video about the first 100 episodes of One Piece. Now it's time for the next 100 episodes, 101 through 200. Get ready, because we have a ton of action in these episodes, and I'm gonna break it all down. So let's get started with 101 through 110. We're just getting into the action of the Alabasta arc. We're at Rain Dinners, and we get to see all of the Baroque Works members. If you don't remember, Rain Dinners is Crocodile's casino/restaurant type thing. The Straw Hats get themselves into some trouble. Who would have thought? We see them escape a pretty dire situation, and Zoro saves Smoker, which I thought was pretty interesting. Smoker had chased them all the way to Alabasta from Logtown and was as good as dead, but Zoro decided to save his life. This chapter of episodes ends with Luffy fighting Crocodile, but Luffy was getting his butt whooped. I've said this before, but Luffy gets his butt whooped in every single fight and then magically recovers and starts to win. But I wanted to know what happened to Luffy, so I continued into 111 through 120. Right off the bat, episode 111 stresses us out because Luffy is sinking into the sand. However, for whatever reason, Nico Robin saves him. This really confused me at the time because she seems like a very bad lady, but I don't know, I guess she has a heart after all. I love the rest of the episodes in this chapter because we get to see all the Straw Hats shine in battle. Usopp and Chopper have to combine powers, Zoro learns to cut through steel, and Sanji needs to be the better kicker and beat the zesty Mr. 2. But my favorite fight was Nami's. Until this fight, Nami had been useless in every single battle. It was about about time for her to get a power-up to be able to help the Straw Hats in battle. The Climateact is a perfect weapon for her, even though it failed several times. But these fights were so good, and this quickly became my favorite part of the series yet. Continuing the fight, it takes us to 121 through 130. In these episodes, so many things happen all at once. Crocodile's entire plan gets revealed, and Koza learns how he was being manipulated. This was great, and the story had grown so much since the first 100 episodes. I think that part of the reason why I like Alabasta so much is because it's the first time there's a really deep story behind a fight. And to be fair, it had been hyped up since the Straw Hats met Vivi and Whiskey Peak. A lot of the individual Straw Hat fights start to end, and we see all of them become victorious. Meanwhile, Luffy comes back with Pell and fights Crocodile for a second time, and I really enjoyed Luffy's new form, Water Luffy. That was a pretty random and funny moment, but then he loses a second time and gets completely dehydrated. We also learn about the huge bomb in the clock tower. I swear, Crocodile had every minute detail planned out. Then we jump into the catacombs and Luffy fights Crocodile a third time. How many times is he gonna fight this guy? While he's fighting Crocodile, everyone up top is scrambling because of the huge bomb in the clock tower. There's just so much going on. Luffy finally defeats Crocodile and Pell flies the bomb into the air. Now here's where I'm confused. Pell 100% should have died flying this bomb into the air. This bomb was supposed to take out the entire city, and he survived being 2 feet away from it? Absolutely no way. But finally we get to the end of these 10 episodes and see the Straw Hats get to party, and there were so many funny moments in this party.
Hey! Luffy, keep your filthy hands off my blade! Easy.
There's plenty to go around.
Who are you, Wolfo?
Hey, where's the women's bath?
You're nuts! And why would I tell you that? That's where the princess is!
I know.
Hey, thanks, old guy. You're the best.
What are you all doing over there?
Peeping. It'll cost 100,000 berries each. Happiness? Punch!
Not me.
But now it's time to move into 131 through 140. The Straw Hats leave Alabasta and say goodbye to Vivi, and this was a pretty sad moment, I'm not gonna lie. You almost caught me tearing up right here. But they find someone new on their ship. Nico Robin. Not only that, Luffy invites this killer to join the crew, the chick that was just trying to kill them. I was mind boggled. This is the first time One Piece had actually blown my mind. I never once expected Robin to be joining the crew, but yet here we were, with her on the ship. Okay, well, the rest of the episodes are filler. It seems to be what happens after every big arc. We get some filler episodes. In this filler, the Straw Hats are on a new island every episode. First, a random salesman pops out of the sea, then Sanji helps a kid become a better cook. After that, the crew goes to a firework festival, and then finally we end up on an island with an old man and a bunch of goats. No, not him. Actual goats. Actually, never mind. There's one more island after that, and they end up in Luluka. But this one was pretty cool. I felt like we were back in the first 10 episodes again with how quickly we were jumping from place to place. But these filler episodes were pretty funny, so I recommend you watch them if you ever get to this point again, because you get to see so many different sides of the crew that you hardly see in the main story episodes. Sometimes I wondered what the Going Merry was like when the Straw Hats aren't in a huge fight, and these episodes show you that. So we go into 141 through 150. The first few episodes in the filler arc on Luluku, and Luluku is a very cool island, especially with the rainbow mist concept. I thoroughly enjoyed this little mini arc and definitely will watch it again. But speaking of islands, right after Luluku, a ship falls from the sky with a map of Sky Island. Oh man, was I excited for this arc. The concept of Sky Island was so cool to me, and I couldn't wait for this arc. So the Straw Hats soon arrive at Jaya, where they meet the Bellamy Pirates, as well as Blackbeard. At the time, we didn't learn Blackbeard's name, but I learned it later on. One of the coldest moments happened in this chapter of episodes. We saw Zoro and Luffy just tank a beating from Bellamy and play it off like nothing happened. I mean, that was top 5 coldest moments so far. In the last few episodes, we meet Cricket, who tells the Straw Hats more about the Sky Island. This series had gotten so good at this point, I had completely fallen in love with it, and there was no chance I was going to stop watching. After learning more about Sky Island, we go into 151 through 160. However, so many of you guys watching this video aren't even subscribed, so help me out and hit that subscribe button. We're going to Sky Island. I was so hyped for this new arc, I literally could not stop watching it because it had become an addiction. So in these episodes, we go through the entire process of traveling to Sky Island, which was very cool. We also got sucked straight into the plot of Sky Island, and I loved that. No crazy build up. This time we were right into the action. The White Berets go straight after the Straw Hats, and then several Straw Hats get carried to the upper yard by a lobster. What is even going on? So at the end of these episodes, episodes, we see Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji start to go and try and save the other crew members that got shipped off by a lobster. They come across the entrances known as the ordeals. We also see a guest appearance for the first time in the anime. One Piece collabed with Tarzan. Oh wait, that was just Zoro. Okay, well that takes us into 161 through 170. In my opinion, one of the coolest things about this arc is the fact that none of these new characters have any idea about the world below. So we get to see a new part of the One Piece world that is just disconnected from the rest. I think that was really cool. In these 10 episodes, a lot of fighting starts to happen. Chopper takes on a priest at the Going Merry, Luffy is fighting a priest that can predict his moves, and the Shandorians start attacking the upper yard. Now I'm not sure how the priest knew Luffy's next moves, but I assume it will be something important in the future. That seems like a pretty important factor. Halfway through the episodes, the crew all reunites, and then 2 episodes later they all separate again while running from a huge snake. I mean, I can't even keep up with everything that's going on at this point, but what do you know? Something super cool happened in this chapter though. Usopp saw a mystery person fixing the Going Merry, so I'm excited to learn who that person is. But after all of that, we are led into the next chapter, 171 through 180. I've noticed while making this video that there is so much more happening in the story than the first 100 episodes. A lot of the details happening seem like they will be very valuable in the future, so I think there's a lot of foreshadowing happening here. In this chapter, we meet all the other priests and the Straw Hats engage in combat. We also get to see the full potential of Inaru's power for the first time. His devil fruit seems so overpowered. It's made of lightning. Well, what? Being made of lightning looks like a cheat code. Also, not to mention the past 10 episodes or so, Luffy has been stuck inside a giant snake's stomach and had no idea where he was until more Straw Hats got swallowed. Skypiea is crazy. I don't get how people don't like this. In the last episode of this chapter, Inaru reveals his plan to destroy Skypiea with his devil fruit powers and leave on a huge ship to the moon of all places. All of these episodes focused on the other Straw Hats and their fights, but also were building up Luffy's fight with Inaru. And in 181 through 190, he starts the fight right away. I love the fight scenes in One Piece, and this chapter brings us some amazing scenes. Zoro gets bodied by Inaru before even landing a punch. But no worries, Luffy comes in to the rescue. Well, maybe. Before Luffy and Inaru fought, I had already figured out in my head that Inaru actually couldn't hurt Luffy. I compared their devil fruits and I was like, how is Inaru's lightning gonna work against Luffy? And then we see one of the funniest but most random faces I've ever seen from Inaru. But Luffy's success against him didn't last long, and he got sent off the ship in a ball of gold. However, Sanji and Usopp were finally back in the fight. I didn't even mention they had been knocked out since the first priest fight, so it was about time. 3 of these episodes take us back to Kalgara and Mont Black Nolan's history, which was really nice to see, and a lot more things made sense after that. But Luffy's itching to get back into this fight, so let's go into 191 through 200. The final 10 episodes of the second set of 100. The Luffy and Inaru fight concludes with Luffy the victor, of course. Then he is able to ring the golden bell, and like after every big fight, the Straw Hats throw a party. And that's about it. We learn about the Poneglyph before the Straw Hats leave, and the last few episodes start the filler arc at Naval Fortress. These 100 episodes were 10 times better than the first 100, mainly because the writing got so much better. I think partly because I'm already so attached to the story and the characters, but still, all the action in both of the huge arcs with Alabasta and Skypiea made this so good. If you want to see a recap of episodes 201 through 300, drop a like and comment below to let me know. One Piece is too long. There's no way I can watch 1,000 episodes. I said those exact words 1 year ago. I was just like many of you watching this video. I refused and resented the show just because of the number of episodes. Fast forward to the present day, and I'm a few hundred episodes in. What caused the switch? There are 2 main reasons. 1, I was bored. I just moved to college and I don't like to party, so I had to do something to pass the time. 2, I came to a conclusion. I thought to myself, if this show has so many episodes and this strong of a fan base, it has to at least be decent, right? Turns out it's more than decent. It's amazing. So if you're anything like me 1 year ago and afraid to start One Piece, give me 31 episodes. 31 episodes. And if you still don't like it after that, then go ahead and drop it. What's at 31 episodes? Arlong Park. If you truly haven't seen the show, I'm warning there are only spoilers from this point on. Everyone else, buckle up and let me explain why Arlong Park is where One Piece viewers get hooked in forever. One of the key reasons why Arlong Park is so effective in hooking viewers is the introduction of new characters. At this point in the series, viewers have already been introduced to the core members of the Straw Hat crew and have started to develop an attachment to them. However, the introduction of Arlong and his crew adds a new level of complexity to the story. Arlong is a ruthless and powerful villain who represents a significant threat to the Straw Hat crew. This kind of creates a sense of danger and tension that you may not have experienced in earlier parts of the series, because you can tell that this is the Straw Hat's most formidable villain yet. Another reason why Arlong Park is so effective is the storyline. The arc begins with the news of Nami, who at this point was a recurring character in the show and was kind of still a mystery, but we had all got the feeling that she was a part of the crew, and then all of a sudden she leaves. So why did she leave? Well, it turns out she's actually a former member of Arlong's crew. This is one of the first big plot twists that we see in the series, and that also helps captivate the viewers. So now us as viewers are left to wonder how this happened. What are Nami's motivations for betraying her former crewmates? As the arc progresses, we see Nami's backstory and learn about the trauma she has experienced as a result of Arlong's rule. This is where viewers start to get hooked, because this creates an emotional investment in Nami's story. One Piece is known for its ability to tackle serious and emotional themes in a way that resonates with viewers. This is shown in Arlong Park. At the heart of the arc is the concept of power and the exploration of human morality and justice, both in its raw physical form and its more insidious manifestations. This is because Arlong is a figure of immense physical strength, capable of crushing his enemies with ease. Now, if you remember earlier in the series, our only other villains had been Kuro, Buggy, and Don Krieg, who didn't really have a lot of physical strength. They relied on weapons or devil fruits to attack their enemies. But Arlong, being a fish man, has this insane physical strength, but it also opens up a bit of world building in the series, because this is a new species that's only in the One Piece world. But back to Arlong, his true power lies in his ability to manipulate and exploit those around him. He's a master of manipulation. He uses fear, greed, and deception to maintain his rule. For example, how he took over Kokoyashi Village. By putting fear into the people of Kokoyashi, he was able to control them with ease. And part of the reason they got so afraid of him is because of Bellemere. Arlong used Bellemere as an example of what would happen to everybody else if they betrayed him. This shows the amount of power in the show and raises important questions about the nature of power and its impact on individuals of society. As I said, this is exactly what we see in Kokoyashi. The arc also digs into the issue of oppression. Arlong's rule over the island represents a form of racial oppression, where the villagers are subjugated and forced to live in poverty. Nami's backstory further highlights the psychological impact that this oppression has on a human, because she is forced to endure years of abuse and trauma under Arlong's rule, and this is where the arc makes you question justice and just look at the unethical deeds that he's doing. Ultimately, Arlong Park serves as an example of the human experience in the struggle for freedom and justice. The arc forces viewers to confront the harsh realities of the world around them and inspires them to seek a more just and equal society. However, the people of Kokoyashi had all lost hope until a kid with a straw hat showed up. Arlong Park is not simply a moment of entertainment in the One Piece series, but rather a deep and thought-provoking concept, because it portrays power and oppression and forces its viewers to engage with fundamental questions about human nature, and in my opinion, inspires them to think about their place in the world. At the center point of Arlong Park is the complex relationship between Nami and Arlong, which serves as a powerful metaphor for the dynamic between the oppressor and the oppressed. Arlong being the oppressor, Nami the oppressed. So as we go through Nami's backstory, it reveals that she was forced to work for Arlong and his crew, stealing treasure in order to pay off a debt, and that's a debt that, quite frankly, she doesn't even owe. She's trying to free her village that was free in the first place. This is an example of economic exploitation. Now those are some big words, so what do they mean? Economic exploitation is when the person that's oppressed, so in this case Nami, are forced to work in order to pay off a debt that is designed to keep them enslaved. So Nami's 100 million berry debt. That debt is so high that it's designed for her to never reach that goal. So that makes Nami's and Arlong's relationship pretty intricate, because she's not only physically oppressed, but she's also being manipulated psychologically. She thinks that there's a way to free her village, when in reality there never was from the start. Arlong knows that Nami has talent and is intelligent, and he uses this to his advantage. How exactly does he use it to his advantage? Well, he plays mind games with her and forces her to hide her emotions. This just shows the dark nature of Arlong. Despite being enslaved, Nami's strength shines through, because at the end she's able to outsmart Arlong. This is still to this day one of Nami's most important moments in the series, because she's able to break through a major block in her life. This was most of her childhood and young teenage years, so Arlong Park inspires viewers once they see the village get freed from the chaos, and that shows Nami and Arlong's relationship has some powerful themes behind it. And by presenting these themes in a way that gets viewers emotionally involved, One Piece is able to create a powerful connection with its viewers and therefore get them to be hooked in for the rest of the series. Some of you may not have realized just how deep the Arlong Park iceberg is, and to be honest, we may not have even touched half of the iceberg. However, I hope I did a good enough job explaining why the Arlong arc is so amazing, because I truly do believe that is where most people get hooked in their first watch through of the series. A lot of you might think that you missed all of the underlying details I just went over, but you didn't. Your brain definitely recognized them, they just didn't quite click. You were just unable to put them into words like this. That arc wouldn't be so interesting if you managed to miss all of the details. My next video will be a review of episodes 101 through 200, so if you're new here, subscribe. It'll help me out and it means a lot. I finally finished pre-time skip One Piece. Well, actually, I kind of finished it a while ago. It's just taken me a long time to gather all my thoughts for this video, but I'm still unsure what I'm going to talk about because there's so many things in my brain that I want to talk about, but they're all just scrambled and I can't even put them into words. So I'm going to talk about some secrets that I learned while watching One Piece and put some emphasis on a lot of the bigger arcs. And one thing I want to start off with is how One Piece has so many hidden and dark meanings to it, which I say hidden, but a lot of them in reality aren't hiding at all, they're in plain sight. And by these dark meanings, I just mean what people don't tell you you're getting into when you first start the series. Because I thought I was just getting into your normal show that's kind of kid friendly, which is funny looking back on it now because One Piece is not kid friendly at all. You've got some of the worst things imaginable, like slavery, cannibalism, human trafficking, people experimenting on humans, all this like childhood trauma. It's ridiculous, and I didn't know One Piece had all of this before I started. But even though those are really bad things in real life, that's also kind of what got me hooked into the show even more because it's interesting to watch. I don't know if that sounds bad, but I said it. Now I understand why it's so hard for people to describe One Piece to people who have never watched it before. Because when I used to ask my friends what it's about, they really could only tell me that it's about this kid named Luffy trying to become king of the pirates. Which doesn't do it justice because that doesn't sound epic and sound like it's worth watching 1,000+ episodes. And I know that's true because I was that guy. They would tell me that and I'd be like, why would I want to watch that? That sounds dumb. And this is a true story. One of my close friends kept telling me I need to watch One Piece and I didn't understand why he was so adamant about it because he just kept telling me it was about this little kid. I thought it sounded stupid and it had too many episodes for me to ever watch it, which is very ironic because now I'm here with an entire YouTube channel dedicated to One Piece content. That tells you how much this show has changed my life. My friends used to be the one telling me to watch One Piece and now I'm the one telling my little brother he needs to watch One Piece. And it's the exact same cycle. He asks what it's about and I'm like, I can't really explain it. There's too much to explain and if I go into detail, I'll just spoil something in the future. And he doesn't understand how good the show actually is. Now for just a little bit about pre-time skip in general, I absolutely loved it. Like, I don't know if it's my favorite anime of all time. I think Attack on Titan might still top it for me, but post-time skip could definitely move it into that #1 spot. However, it blows my mind that just one dude has been writing this story, and it also blows my mind how well he has done to just make us fall in love with these characters, the arcs that they go through, and even the ships that they ride. We fall in love with the ship that they're riding. I would consider One Piece like a complete masterpiece. It does have its flaws, just like everything, but even the flaws are something that makes it better. And now that I say that, I can't even like think of an actual flaw. One thing that pops in my head is maybe like some of the inconsistencies throughout the story, but even so, when you think about that, it's just like, that's just One Piece, man. That's how it is. I've already made a video about episodes 1 through 100 and another video about episodes 101 through 200, so I'm not going to go super in depth in those episodes and pretty much that first half of pre-time skip. However, I want to talk about some of the bigger arcs, especially like Water 7, Marineford, all of that. For me, Water 7 is when the story actually started to feel like it was getting deep. Sure, you had a little bit before that, like in Alabasta, for example, but in Water 7, Oda took it all to another level. For example, Usopp leaving the crew added emotions that we hadn't felt so far in the series. It was very bizarre seeing him and Luffy fight so seriously like they did. And then on top of that, you have emotions from the CP9 betrayal, that random guy named Frankie, and the sad reality of the going mayor. Water 7 was like a complete emotional roller coaster, and that's what made it so amazing. Then you transition into Enies Lobby, which is still kind of on the emotional side, but not as much in my opinion. A lot of people claim it's their favorite arc, but to be honest, I just like the highlights. Everything else is meh. That could be a very hot take, but Enies Lobby, in my opinion, was not that great. There's definitely some better arcs, but by highlights, I mean stuff like the I Want to Live moment. That was just insane. I could not believe it when I first heard it. Like, the voice actor for Robin did an incredible job during that scene because it felt so raw and gut-wrenching, and I had goosebumps listening to it. And then some other highlights are obviously like the fight with Luffy and Lucci. That was a dope fight. And then the Mary coming back to save them one last time. But other than that, I didn't see the crazy hype behind Enies Lobby. Sure, it was good, but it's not like peak fiction or even the best written arc in the series. I'm not saying it's bad, but some people hold it to such a high standard, and I just don't understand where that standard is. So let's talk about Thriller Bark for a second. Thriller Bark was weird, man, but it was a good weird. Definitely a change of pace with the scary theme it had. And to be honest, the arc was just different. That's the easiest word to describe it as, different. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but something was just different about the entire arc in general. I don't know if it was how the characters acted or the way they spoke, but it felt so much different from everything else we've seen. I don't know if anyone agrees with me. If you do, please comment below so I don't feel alone in this, but maybe it's just me. But that's about all I have to say about Thriller Bark. It wasn't an amazing arc, but it wasn't a terrible arc either. It was just mid. And then you have Sabaody and Impel Down, which are obviously two amazing arcs, and I think I can make multiple videos about each individual arc because there's so many moments in there that deserve their own video. Sabaody just has so much world building, and we learn more about everything in the show pretty much. The introduction of the Worst Generation, all the Marine Admirals, the Pacifistas, and then you have Celestial Dragons, a whole slavery auction. That's one thing I wasn't expecting watching this show, was to see an auction where people are being auctioned off. That blew my mind because that was nothing I expected to see. Maybe slavery, but an actual auction for the slavery was not something I expected to see. Then on top of that, you have the Straw Hats disappearing, which I think is the saddest moment in all of pre-time skip, because Luffy lost everything on that day. The crew is Luffy's will to live, and when you lose that, it's obviously devastating. And this is the point, I'll be really open here, is when I first shed a few tears to this show. It was watching all the Straw Hats disappear and just seeing how it affected Luffy. To be honest, I don't have a lot to say about Impel Down at the moment, mainly because I think it deserves its own video at some point in the future. But I don't think I can make a video about pre-time skip and not mention how clutch my man Bon Clay was. This arc alone put him as one of my favorite characters in the series, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this, because from everything I read, it seems like he's a big fan favorite at this point. And I do hope we see him again at some point, but honestly, I don't know if it's even possible, and we also don't know if he's even still alive. I think he is alive, but I'm just saying, we don't know for sure. Magellan could have done unholy things to that man. Then obviously you have Marineford, which I wish I spoke on it directly after watching, because watching Marineford was an unreal experience. It's taken me a long time to start catching up with One Piece because I don't believe in watching a ton of episodes in a day. I discipline myself to watch 2 to 3 episodes a day max, because personally I think if you watch a lot of episodes in one day, it just jumbles them in your brain and you can't remember like anything specific. And I like to remember specific weird niche things, and that's why I don't like to watch a ton of episodes. And maybe you can watch a lot of episodes, but I can't. However, where I'm getting with this is that with Marineford, I could not discipline myself. All that discipline got thrown out the window. I watched the entire Marineford arc in probably 2 days. Shanks pulling up was an insane moment. We pretty much hadn't seen him since the first like 5 episodes of the series, so it was great to see him again. Obviously, you have all the fights going down, the deaths. I think Marineford was also done almost perfectly, but also I think Marineford could have been an arc that was like 200 episodes long if you wanted to show all the fights. Because of the sheer amount of people and pirates and admirals there were so many fights going on off screen that we missed, and honestly I wish we could have seen all of those fights. I would have been down to watch every single fight. I don't care how long it dragged on, but with how it was animated, it almost seemed like some people were just standing around half the time, not even fighting. But I believe that there was just a lot of off-screen fights going on. But overall, I was taken aback by how dark some of the things got in this show, mainly because I didn't know. People don't tell you that before you start watching the show, and there's just so much content that I could talk about in this video. But let's be real, it would be like an hour long long if I talked about everything I wanted to talk about, but I'll most likely make a video about every single arc in the future at some point. But I just want to catch you guys up on where I'm at in the show, so I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop a like, subscribe. Peace. One Piece is one of, if not the best show of all time. However, like everything else in the world, it has its ups and downs. I enjoyed every single One Piece arc that I've watched so far, but there were some that were dragged on for way too long in my opinion. For me, Skypiea is the first. I actually enjoyed Skypiea a lot. Like, just as an arc, I really liked it, but there were a lot of things that I did not like, and there were definitely some spots that needed a bit better pacing. So even though I liked it, I do see other people's point of views, and it makes sense why so many people dislike Skypiea or even skip it altogether, although that does seem kind of crazy to me, skipping an entire arc, especially on your first watch through, because personally I don't think you should skip a single episode of One Piece, and especially not the entire Skypiea arc, because there's so much world building happening throughout that arc. But that's not the purpose of this video. And the second arc that I thought was very boring was Long Ring, Long Land. This is a very common one in the One Piece fandom, and it's really just unfortunate that it's right after Skypiea, so it's like there's kind of two boring arcs in a row. But once again, I can't say I agree with everyone else that this arc is skippable. Is it worse than other arcs like Alabasta? Yes, but you can't expect every arc of a show to be better than the ones before it. And that's not even saying a show has to constantly improve. That's not it at all. And at the end of the day, everything is subjective. It's up to people's opinions what they think is a good arc. I mean, you can go statistical with it, but at the end of the day, it's just how much you personally enjoyed it. Long Ring, Long Land wasn't completely worthless. It had its good moments. One of my favorite moments is Zoro and Sanji fighting together. It had a very powerful message and really increased Zoro and Sanji's bond a lot. Sure, they still fight like siblings, but that's already ingrained into their character. That's not something that's gonna disappear, and this fight was really good for them. Another moment is this speech from Zoro after Chopper got stolen away.
Quit your belly aching, Chopper. It's disgraceful.
Zoro?
You made the choice to set sail as a pirate. Only you. And now you have to live with the consequences of that decision. We agreed to the terms of this game. You, Usopp, and everyone else did the best they could. Not one pirate worth his salt is gonna sympathize with those tears. A man would suck it up and quietly watch the rest of this game.
I love that speech, and it seems like every arc Zoro has some sort of motivational speech to give to the group, and even though he is horrible, I mean horrible with directions, I think Zoro is actually the wisest person in the Straw Hat crew, especially in the sense of pirates and being pirates and all of that, because a lot of these guys like Nami, Sanji, Luffy, Usopp, this is their first rodeo in the whole pirate world. The only other person with pirate experience you can say is Robin at the moment, because other people hadn't joined the crew at this point. But Zoro being smart makes sense. He's written to be this cool, stoic guy. So all in all, Long Ring, Long Land wasn't a complete waste of an arc. Yes, it wasn't the best, and it may seem like it was a waste compared to the better arcs in the series, but in reality, it wasn't even that bad. Now let's get to what is, in my opinion, the worst arc in the show, at least that I've seen so far, and that's Fishman Island. And that's what this video is all about. The title, thumbnail, you guys know, that's why you're here, that's why you clicked on the video, and we're gonna be deep diving into Fishman Island in this video, and why it is the worst arc, worse than Skypiea, worse than Long Ring, Long Land. And if you want to see my full breakdown of Skypiea and the other arcs in a future video, just let me know in the comments. I can make that happen. But let's get into one of the main things that is the worst thing to have ever been written as a major plot point in One Piece. Sanji and Nosebleeds. Sanji's known as this character that's a pervert. He likes women. He can't talk to women. Gets hard eyes whenever he speaks to Nami and Robin. You get the point. And this is low-key one of my least favorite character personalities in One Piece, because we see this with several different characters. I mean, the llama, what is that called? Oh, camel. The camel in Alabasta was just like Sanji, and there's always randomly just other guys similar to Sanji thrown into the mix. I just don't like this. I think this is like a dumb point almost. There's no time where I think this is funny. But either way, Sanji and his nosebleeds became a major plot point in the Fishman Island arc, and I don't understand how this was written in here. I just don't get it. Before we ever get to Fishman Island, he flies out of the boat from a stream of blood through his nose. Ugh. I know you guys are already typing comments, right? Oh, we spent 2 years on an island with a bunch of dudes. Yes, I know that. I don't think that should be written as much into the story as it was in Fishman Island, and I don't know that you can really argue, because until the final fight scene against Hordy Jones's army, Sanji was just out of the loop. He was out of the mix. He wasn't there to do anything. Let's go back to when we first get to Fishman Island again. They're at the Mermaid Cafe, and Sanji ends up losing a lot of blood. Now we have all these episodes we're running around because Sanji can't get blood. None of the Fishmen will give him blood. And this is where I really didn't like this whole nosebleed thing, because we're introduced to this deep backstory between fishmen and humans, and discrimination, slavery, all of this bad stuff. And we're getting introduced to this backstory because Sanji needs a blood transplant because he couldn't contain himself around some mermaids. You catch my drift here? We go from Sanji passing out to mermaid eye candy to a backstory of discrimination and slavery. What? Now, in my opinion, that's where this nosebleed thing got taken a little bit too far. I could talk about Sanji's nosebleeds all day, but to wrap up this thought about Sanji and Fishman Island, I just want to say that is probably what ruined a lot of Fishman Island for me. I think it would have been a much better arc without the whole Sanji nosebleed thing. But there were also things that made this arc bad, and that's why it's still lower than other arcs. The second thing is just the villain was not that terrifying. This is the first arc after the time skip. Everybody's supposed to be stronger, faster, learned hockey, all of this stuff. And the villain we're fighting is Hordy Jones. The crew already beat a Fishman in the 35th episode of the series. They do say that Hordy's stronger than Arlong, but really, how much stronger can he be? He knows no types of hockey, no devil fruit powers. And in order to make this seem like even more of an intense fight, they gotta make up some sort of pill drug that we never see again after Fishman Island to enhance all these fishmen and make them stronger. I think Fishman Island had a great plot line, like bringing up all the backstories between fishmen and humans, the fishmen wanting to kill all the humans. I just think we needed a stronger villain, that's all. And if you think about how much they've been training for 2 years, it makes sense. Because in order to make this an even close fight at all, Luffy has to end up in the water, so Hordy has the advantage. But we already saw Hordy get sliced up by Zoro in the water already. So at this point, we know he's all drugged up, but we also know the limits of Hordy's strengths. He's not that strong. I feel like I'm just ranting, but that is the harsh truth. Those are really the two main things that I believe make Fishman Island the worst arc. And my favorite thing about this was probably the backstory of the fishmen and the humans. The backstories and the very strong senses of prejudice are what saved this arc and made this arc really enjoyable. It does a great job further characterizing Jinbei, the very underwhelming and non-threatening villains, as well as the gags like Sanji, are what really took this arc downhill. Let me know what you think about Fishman Island in the comments, and maybe I'm completely wrong with my thoughts. One Piece is the greatest show on Earth, and I will hold that to my grave, that One Piece will forever be the greatest piece of fiction in our lifetimes, and maybe ever, to be honest with you. The ending of One Piece could be completely underwhelming. It could be like Game of Thrones season 8 level bad, and I would still say this just because we're already at over 1,100 episodes, and just the story so far is amazing. We're gonna dive deeper into that later on in this video, but I wanted to make this video because I'm finally caught up to One Piece. I've been caught up for a long time, but when I first started this channel, I made videos at every 100 episodes I've watched of One Piece, every 200 episodes, and then I think I went to 500 episodes, and I never made one completing the arc. You know what I'm saying? So now that I'm caught up, I've been caught up, like I said, for a long time, but I wanted to make this video to complete that series. Overall, it took me like a year and a half to completely catch up to One Piece. I wasn't fully caught up for a while. I left like 20 episodes between me and the finish before I wanted to go to weekly watching. But man, the journey of watching One Piece was amazing. Through it all, I was posting content. I still post shorts on here daily, and I've been working on my long form videos to make better content for you guys. But yeah, One Piece is truly the best thing that's ever happened to me, because not only that, just watching peak fiction, but also I created this channel and things blew up more than I could ever, you know, possibly dream of doing. And the cool thing is now, myself and some friends convinced my brother to even start watching One Piece, and he's already in Dressrosa, I think, and that's just after a few months. He has been flying through. So if you want me to make a video with him, doing like a little Q&A with him, how he likes it, let me know by liking this video. But it just pains me to know that there are so many people out there that will never give One Piece a chance because either it's too long or it's anime, and some people still have this weird stigma about anime, thinking that it's weird and you're like a weeb if you watch it, which is just completely not true. But maybe with some of the collabs One Piece is doing this year, it will spread the word out to a lot of these people, because there are some major One Piece things happening. You have an NBA collab with the Los Angeles Lakers in February, just a few weeks from now. Actually, the live action is bringing a lot of new people into One Piece that didn't like anime. Now they can watch it in live action. You got season 2 of that dropping, I think, late 2025. You also have The One Piece, kind of the remake of the series to fix some of the pacing issues and also bring new animation, because sometimes the bad animation is what also causes people not to watch One Piece. You have big time YouTubers and streamers like iShowSpeed, Jinxie, Moist Critical also bringing the word of One Piece out. Speed just revealed his $50,000 One Piece setup a few weeks ago, and then even more collabs. Like just today as I'm filming this, One Piece announced a collab with Lego, so that's huge. I think 2025 is going to be a crazy year for One Piece. Hopefully it is. Now quickly, I want to touch on some of these post time skip arcs. Like I said, I made those videos when I first started my channel of the first 100, 200, 500 eps. So now let's quickly go through the last 600 episodes or so. The first post time skip arcs, Fishman Island and Punk Hazard. Fishman Island, for a long time, I hated. I actually did kind of make a video on it, but it was mainly just a Sanji rant. I still to this day hate Sanji's character in that arc. A lot of people agree with me with that. But Fishman Island has grown on me a little bit. I think I disliked it at first and gave it another chance, and it's grown on me. Part of the reason I disliked it was Hody Jones. I did not like him as a villain, but I've realized now he wasn't really a villain, and he was more just a representation of a bigger cause, the racism between humans and fishmen, and that's what Hody Jones was really representing. He wasn't mainly meant to be a villain or to be someone that Luffy has to defeat to get stronger. It was a way to kind of help the viewers understand the differences between fishmen and humans and why they've been separated and segregated for so long. So for that reason, Fishman Island has grown on me. The remastered version that they've been posting has been really cool to watch as well. Punk Hazard, another arc that's just kind of building the story. I want to talk later in this video about the long-term story development of what makes One Piece so good, and Punk Hazard is an arc that is just kind of for that. You have the Luffy and Law alliance that starts. They start their plan to take down a Yonko in Punk Hazard, which pays off like 400 episodes down the line. That's crazy. Punk Hazard itself, Caesar gets introduced. Caesar's around for a while. You have the child experiments that are happening. You know, a lot of people say it's like a lower tier arc, but there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in there. Aokiji shows up for the first time since leaving the Marines at the end of the arc. We see Doflamingo. We see Smoker again. It's a cool arc. Dressrosa is an arc that a lot of people love, but also hate because of its length and how drawn out it is. When I first watched it, I didn't really care that much of it being drawn out. I didn't feel like it was drawn out that much, and the pacing was super slow, at least to me. There are just a lot of different storylines going on at the same time in the arc. You got the Straw Hats spread out. All of them are experiencing their own things. You got Frankie, Senor Pink, you got Robin, you got Rebecca, Kiros, Doflamingo. Luffy's doing his old thing at the Coliseum as Lucy, reuniting with Sabo. You got Zoro lost per usual. There's a lot happening in Dressrosa. That's kind of why it takes forever, because Oda's trying to tell all those different stories at the same time. And then of course you also have the pacing issues that happen every now and then. But I liked the arc, and you're not really gonna hear from me that I hate any One Piece arc. Long Ring Longland, even I kind of enjoyed watching that one. I'll say it, I enjoyed it. Then you go on to Zou, and we're learning a lot more there. Another alliance is formed, continuing to build up Wano, this big arc that's happening later. Then we go to Whole Cake Island, and this is the one arc where I'd say the pacing was a little rough. The Luffy versus Katakuri fight, and as a whole, was a little rough, just with how long it took. This was like a 30-40 episode fight, and for half the episodes, Luffy couldn't even punch the guy. It was just him questioning over and over and over and over, how can I even fight this guy? That's what got onto my nerves a little bit, but other than that, the arc was all right. It was cool to see all these family members of Big Mom, her having 80-something kids, being a straight up bop. And then I was really glad to see in that arc that Brook got a lot of love. Brook was the MVP of Whole Cake Island for sure. Learning about Germa 66 was cool. Also Sanji's backstory, you know, kind of getting the extended version of his backstory. We already had some with Zeph, but then learning that Mr. Prince was actually real. Sanji calling himself Mr. Prince wasn't just a joke. He was actually a prince from a kingdom. That was pretty cool. Once again, another one of those things that Oda does that foreshadows way in the future and then pays off long term. Like he foreshadowed that in Little Garden, and then it pays off all the way in Whole Cake Island. And then lastly, we have Wano, Onigashima, and Egghead now. All amazing arcs. I mean, there's no complaints about those. Wano is extremely long, but it's all worth it in my opinion. I don't really think there's a lot of points in Wano where I thought stuff just didn't need to be there. It was all important, in my opinion, to the story overall. And we're getting to the point now where every episode is going to be heat. Egghead, after Egghead, Elbaf, and then after that, who knows what. We're getting into the thick of it, of the One Piece story, and I can't be more excited. So there's all the post time skip arcs and some of my general thoughts about them. Real quick, I do want to give a shout out to my shorts right here. Check this out. I got the Straw Hat Pool Party. Look at Nami. You got Brooke checking Nami out. We got everyone else here. I also have another pair, Chopper's Graduation. These are sick. I love these ones. The pink on the back, they're so cool. They're from Metanoia. I partnered up with them a few months ago, and you can use code Yonko to save 15% on all of these shorts. They also recently dropped a new version, the Snake Princess with Boa Hancock. So if you're interested, definitely check them out and use my code for a discount. Pre versus post time skip, which is better? It's such a hard question for me to answer because pre time skip and post time skip are very different. Pre time skip is almost kind of like a fun pirate vibes. We're like, you know, we're playing pirates a little bit. Post time skip is when it gets serious. They realize, the Straw Hats do, that they aren't strong enough to continue their pirate journey without training a little bit. So we have this time skip, and post time skip, everyone's a lot more serious and stronger. They're still cracking jokes every now and then, but it's not nearly the same vibe. If you know, if you've watched it, you kind of know what I'm saying. Pre time skip is just way more fun and less serious. Post time skip, we start getting really serious, especially right now where the story is. So it's hard to answer. I love the pre-time skip vibe of the less seriousness, but I also like post-time skip and it getting serious now and the story itself just really starting to connect. That's maybe why I would choose post-time skip, because we're seeing a lot of the stuff that is mentioned pre-time skip starting to connect the dots in the story later on post-time skip, which just proves why this might be the best piece of fiction ever, because hardly any other stories out there do this. Attack on Titan is another one that has insane foreshadowing, but not to the level of this amount of chapters and this amount of episodes. And that kind of leads me to the question, what makes One Piece so good? Because if you're just looking on the surface, and a lot of viewers aren't like trying to deep everything in a show. They're just kind of watching for something that's fun, and One Piece is perfectly fine for that as well. You can just watch and see the stuff on the surface, but it also can get really, really deep. I always think of it like the classic iceberg. You have the stuff poking above the water that's kind of a lot smaller, and it's all the basic stuff, and then you get into the water is when you get all the dark undertones and parts of the story that you don't really see. You kind of have to read in between the lines to get. And what I mean by that would be all the isms. Like One Piece has racism issues, it has cannibalism issues, it has terrorism involved. The story covers so many problems that the world faces today, and as it continues, I think we'll see even more of these dark things happen, especially learning more about the Void Century. The government probably did a lot of really bad things to cover that up, and one of the recent ones we saw was the Buster Call at Ohara. I personally think that's one of the lighter things. Getting rid of an entire country is going to be one of the lighter things the government has done to cover up all this past information that they've completely erased from the world. So you have all that makes One Piece good, and then I'll just rattle off some more things. You have the world building, the storytelling, the friendships, the backstories. Characters like Senor Pink have crazy, sad backstories that you wouldn't ever expect. The foreshadowing and planning also I've kind of briefly mentioned already. And then one of my favorite things is the long-term satisfaction and payoff. Like I said, there were things placed at the very start of the story that are just now starting to pay off 25 plus years later. Oda has most of One Piece already planned. You can tell there are things that he's kind of adding as he's going, but the general basis of the story has been planned since the start. Like Skypiea. Skypiea episode like 200 or so, pretty deep into it, but also, I mean, when there's 1100 episodes, it's only 20% into One Piece. Skypiea has Gear 5 foreshadowed at one point with the sun and moon symbol. Mr. Prince, like I talked about earlier, was all the way in Little Garden. That paid off almost 600 episodes later, 700 episodes later. And then all of us that are still watching One Piece are waiting for the ultimate long-term goal to finally pay off, and that's the Straw Hats achieving their dreams that we get introduced to at the start of the story when the characters are introduced, most notably Luffy becoming Pirate King. So you have all this, and then on top of it, you just have these amazing action scenes, especially with today's animation. Luffy versus Kaido, Gear 5 Luffy was crazy to watch. Zoro versus King was beautiful, Sanji versus Queen, and then even some of the older fights were also just really entertaining to watch. The action is always entertaining, so that's why I say One Piece is good for everyone. The people that just want to watch something, you know, enjoyable, and the people that also want to deep it a little bit more. It has everything. Even I am barely scratching the surface here of what makes One Piece good, but it's truly a one-of-a-kind show that I will always petition people to watch no matter what. That's pretty much my rant for this video. I don't have a lot more to say. I could go more in depth on some of the stuff, but maybe I'll save that for a later video. If you guys enjoyed, as always, it means a lot to me if you drop a like. See you in the next one. Zoro is by far the best character in One Piece, in my opinion. And not because he's a badass swordsman that can whoop everyone's ass. I'm not a part of that crazy Zoro fan base that loves Zoro so much. No, it's honestly because he has some of the most personality and development out of any character. Which is weird, I know, trust me, I could hear you typing your comments, but just hear me out for this video, okay? Zoro is this stoic and strong character that's been here since the beginning, and we still don't know his backstory after 20 years. But I still think he's one of the best written characters. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense, but I will try my best to translate my point of view to you guys. Honestly, there's probably going to be a lot of hot takes from me in this video that you may not agree with, and I'm curious to know what everyone thinks, so leave some comments down below and like the video. And also, before I get started, hit that subscribe button. Alright, I want to start off with Zoro's strength, because I think his strength in the show is very off and on. It seems like Zoro is really only as strong as Oda needs him to be. And this happens a lot with characters who are second in line to the main character, because obviously you don't want them to be stronger than the main character, but you also need to write them to have these good fight scenes and stuff that makes them seem strong. And if you ask me who the second person in command in the Straw Hat crew is, it's 100% Zoro. And there's people that argue for Sanji, but they are just not on the same level. Even though a lot of other Straw Hats seem to have way more screen time than Zoro, I still think he's the second guy. And that leads me to my first point. I think at the beginning of One Piece, Zoro is stronger than Luffy. So when Luffy is first recruiting Zoro to his crew, I think at that point Zoro is stronger than Luffy. And you can't really have a new member joining the crew and be stronger than the main character and captain. And while there's not really enough content in the first 20 episodes to really tell that Zoro is stronger than Luffy, I still think he is. And I think this because within these first 20 episodes, Zoro has to get nerfed. And by nerfed, I'm talking about the fight with Mihawk. Realistically, what is Mihawk doing at the Baratier at this time? Yeah, he had beef with Don Krieg, but Don Krieg's crew was obviously no match for Mihawk, so why did he go through the trouble of following them? It really doesn't make that much sense when you think about it. And I think Mihawk was kind of introduced here so the show could have this ominous, overpowered character introduced, because at this point there really wasn't anything like that. But I think a main reason Mihawk was at the Baratier was to nerf Zoro and make him weaker. Zoro got humbled badly by Mihawk, basically losing to the equivalent of a butter knife. So this hurts his morale, his motivation is hurt, and also remember the massive scar that Mihawk cut into his chest. I don't care what you say, I think Zoro got nerfed here so he wasn't stronger than Luffy. So for the next couple months he has this cut that needs to heal, and he's constantly fighting other people reopening this cut. And you know Oda wanted to put emphasis on this cut because it's mentioned in the next arc at Arlong Park. Arlong is holding Zoro up and he sees this cut across his chest and he almost gets afraid. He wonders how Zoro is still this fierce of a fighter even after being so bruised and battered. This scar from Mihawk becomes a symbol of Zoro's character because it's proof of his only loss to another swordsman. Obviously scars don't just disappear, but Zoro's scar is still there today as a reminder and motivator that Zoro has not yet achieved his dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman. Moving on to a less serious trope of Zoro's character, the big brother vibes that he has. It kind of makes sense because he is the most serious out of the crew, but a lot of the time shows give more of a dad persona to this character, and I would argue that Zoro gives off big brother vibes over dad vibes. And I think this only starts after Chopper joins the crew, because Chopper is the little brother to Zoro's big brother, you know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of moments where you actually see this relationship in the show. At one point during Skypiea, we see Zoro save Chopper in the air.
Chopper!
In Long Green Longland, we see him save Chopper from drowning.
Chopper! Look out!
The basically barrels and the Swordfish King boats have been sunk. They're officially disqualified.
Are you okay?
That really stunk. Thank you, Zoro.
In Wano, Zoro says, "You won't die, right?" to Chopper.
このフロア任せていいか遊んでる暇はねえんだ死にゃあしねえよな
もちろん
もうこのウイルスの構造は分かったんだ。
And you could argue that he would do this for all the other crew members, but we just don't know if he would for a fact. It makes sense Zoro and Chopper are so close because Chopper is always treating Zoro's injuries because it seems like he gets injured the most. Then there's a polar opposite sibling relationship with Zoro and Sanji. It's the equivalent of twins always thinking they have to be better than the other at everything they do. Oddly enough, Longring Longland has another great moment between the two because they finally decide to work together to defeat the groggy monsters. So Zoro gives off this big brother persona, and I have a theory as to why Zoro's sibling relationship is more prominent in his character compared to other Straw Hats. And this theory relates to his backstory. You're probably like, what backstory? Well, from the few flashbacks and episodes we've seen, it looks like Zoro does not have much of a family. He basically lived at that sword dojo he was training at. So I think these family type relationships that he's shown to have are because he never truly had a family to begin with. And this is Oda's way of showing that now. This theory does make sense. However, you could apply it to other Straw Hats and it kind of contrasts the theory because they also didn't have families, but then they don't have these attributes as much as Zoro has them. And also, we just don't know his backstory, so it's difficult to make assumptions about why he acts the way he acts. We know why Nami loves money because she was forced into slavery to get money. We know why Sanji won't hit a lady, and we know why Luffy and the others act the way they do. But with Zoro, we don't know his backstory, so we don't really know why he acts the way he does. Jumping to another reason why I love Zoro's character is his comedic relief. Zoro's not meant to be a funny character, and he never tries to be funny, but he is still able to provide comedic moments due to just pure genius writing from Oda. One of my favorite examples of this is in the Sabaody arc. Zoro is minding his own business, walking down the street when he comes face to face with the Celestial Dragon, and I'll let the scene speak for itself.
Hey, what's the matter? Do you need some directions or something?
While his comedic relief is an amazing quality, I want to end off with some of my favorite qualities from Zoro, which are his loyalty, discipline, and honor. Zoro's loyalty to Luffy changes over time. At first, he joins the crew to chase his own dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman. Zoro's dream is first, he made that clear, and Luffy's is second. However, at some point during the series, that switches, and Zoro becomes fully devoted to helping Luffy become the Pirate King first and putting his goals second. There's no real spot where we see the switch. Shoulder Bark might be the best example, but even so, if Zoro is willing to take all of Luffy's pain in order to save him, that means that switch has already happened. Zoro wouldn't have done that if he was not fully devoted to Luffy at that time. It was a gradual change over time, but we were able to see it. The switch of him wanting to achieve his dream first to putting Luffy's dream above his. Luffy and Zoro's relationship is written so good, it's hard to put into words. Luffy doesn't listen to many people. We can all tell that by watching the show. But when Zoro is serious, Luffy will listen to his advice and sometimes almost take an order from Zoro like he's the captain. We saw this when Zoro said Usopp has to say sorry before joining the crew again, and also in Punk Hazard when Zoro told Luffy to quit screwing around. Luffy's entire attitude changed after Zoro said these things, and it shows the mutual respect that they have for each other. I feel like I've said everything is Zoro's best attribute, but I think the actual best attribute of Zoro's character is his altruistic personality. He is one of the most selfless characters in One Piece, and I think that's why so many people love his character. And because he's so selfless, I think that Zoro's dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman is not just a dream for himself. It is partly for himself, yes, but it was also for his childhood best friend Kuina. I think a big reason why Zoro wants to become the world's greatest swordsman is for Kuina, and not mainly for himself. Because if you think about it, Zoro and Kuina's relationship is very similar to Luffy, Ace, and Sabo when they were growing up. This was Zoro's only true friend as a kid, and he probably saw her as a sister, so it makes sense why he would want to accomplish this dream for her. Overall, I think Zoro's character is much deeper than a lot of people see, and hopefully I did a good job putting in perspective his character and what makes it so special. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Throughout the course of One Piece, we've seen countless moves from Luffy. Many of these are iconic. For example, the classic Gum Gum Pistol and Gum Gum Bazooka. But you could also say stuff like Gears 2, 3, 4, and 5 are iconic now. However, within the 1,000 plus episodes, we see a lot of these moves happen only once or twice and that's it. So it's very easy to forget about them. Even the creator of One Piece, Oda Ichiro, has said that he sometimes has to look up certain moves because he can't remember them. So that tells you right there how many different moves Luffy has used. But we can cut Oda some slack because when you have written over 1,000 episodes of a show, you're bound to forget some things. But today I'm going over 10 moves Luffy has either forgotten about or only used once. And if you want to see part 2 of this in the future, make sure to drop a like on this video. Anyways, now let's get into number 1. Gum Gum UFO. This is a move that we saw in the Punk Hazard arc. And like many of the other moves I'll be talking about today, it's only been used once, which I don't really understand why. Because Gum Gum UFO allows Luffy to fly. He stretches out his leg and wraps it around something. Then he releases his leg and uses that built up energy as like a whip. And all that energy whips his entire lower half around and allows him to fly like a helicopter. I mean, this move is ridiculous. But there's even crazier moves coming up later in the video. Number 2, Gum Gum Fireworks. Just like Gum Gum UFO, this move has only been seen once in the anime. And Luffy uses it when the Straw Hats first arrive in Skypiea. The White Berets attack the Straw Hats, so Luffy has to come up with a way to defend themselves. He spins his arms and legs in separate directions and gains a tremendous amount of speed, which then turns into like a ball. And after that, flying fists and feet go everywhere, knocking out anybody in the vicinity. It's a pretty cool move, and honestly, in like Gear 2 form or something, this would look pretty cool. That leads us into number 3, Gum Gum Giant Gavel. This is a move that Luffy uses very early on in the series, and it's the final move that defeats Don Krieg at the Baratier. In Gum Gum Giant Gavel, Luffy grabs onto the person's neck with his feet, and then starts spinning around to make like a coil effect, stretching out his legs to build up energy. Then he starts spinning his legs and Don Krieg is like in a tornado. All while he's doing that, he slams him down onto the ground. I'm not sure why he doesn't use this move more often. But anyways, number 4, Gum Gum Daze. Gum Gum Daze is seen in the fight between Luffy and Inaru. Inaru is able to use Haki and predict Luffy's moves. So in order to counter this, Luffy abandons all thought processes in his brain and relies on instinct to dodge Inaru's attacks. This is like a very early on usage of observation Haki for Luffy, and it also makes for a pretty funny face. I doubt we'll ever see this move again because Luffy knows all 3 types of Haki now, but who knows. Number 5, Gum Gum Munch Munch. When the Straw Hats are in Alabasta fighting Crocodile, Luffy uses the move Gum Gum Munch Munch, where he attempts to make his mouth as big as possible and fit Crocodile's entire body in his mouth. And it actually worked for a few seconds, but Luffy's jaw wasn't strong enough and Crocodile just came right out of it. I guess this is kind of a move that we see every time he eats a big chunk of meat, but instead he just tried it out on a person. A lot of you guys watching this video aren't subscribed, and it would mean a lot if you just hit that subscribe button and you'll get to see a bunch more One Piece content. Number 6, Gum Gum Ally Robot. Gum Gum Ally Robot is seen in the Enies Lobby arc. The Straw Hats first arrive at Enies Lobby to save Robin, and Luffy is confronted by a bunch of Marines. In this move, he takes a hostage Marine and wraps himself around him. That way he could control the Marine like a robot. This stopped the other Marines from attacking him because they didn't want to hurt their own, and it allowed Luffy to defeat them with ease. Once again, this is a move that we only see one time, but there are plenty of other situations where Luffy could have used this and it would have been actually very helpful. And that's the thing with a lot of these moves. Luffy could use them more often, or he just doesn't want them to be a main move that Luffy uses. But these techniques are good. Anyways, number 7, Gum Gum Shotgun. Just like Gum Gum Munch Munch, this is when Luffy is fighting Crocodile the second time. And this is basically a fake Gum Gum pistol. Luffy acts like he's throwing Gum Gum pistol, and while his fist is going towards his opponent, he fakes it out and says Gum Gum Shotgun. He then hits his arm to make it wobble. That way it seems like there are multiple fists coming at his opponent. In my eyes, this is almost like a single arm Gum Gum Gatling, and it makes his Gum Gum pistol so much more powerful. So why does he never use it again? I don't get it. Other moves like Gum Gum Daze and Ally Robot make sense if they're never used again, but this one could easily be a technique that Luffy uses often. Piggybacking off of number 7, number 8 is Water Luffy. Now this is more of a form than a technique, but it's still against Crocodile in the same fight that Gum Gum Shotgun is used. Luffy's new tactic to beat Crocodile once he figured out that he's weak to liquid was to douse himself with water. So he shows up to the fight with a big water barrel, but he then ditches the water barrel and drinks all of the water, becoming Water Luffy, which is just a big, fat, blubby version of Luffy. And he even springs a couple leaks. I don't know how this is possible, but he was leaking water through his stomach. Now this is obviously something that we will probably never see again, or it could be something Oda forgot about. I kind of doubt it though. Number 9, Gum Gum Jet Human Shield. This is the first move that includes one of his gears, which is kind of interesting. All of his gear moves, which they are piggybacked off of his normal moves, there's not really any like these ones where they only are used once. But Gum Gum Jet Human Shield was used at the Battle of Marineford when Luffy was confronted by Mihawk. Luffy grabs Buggy and uses him as a human shield against Mihawk, so he's able to dodge Mihawk's attacks and just have Buggy take all the hits. If Luffy and Buggy ever reunite again, maybe we get to see this move, but like the rest of these, I think this is a one-time thing. And that leads us to number 10, Gum Gum Eater. Similar to Gum Gum Munch Munch, but this is with something else. We see this countless times throughout the series, but there's only one time that Luffy calls this move out, and that is after the Punk Hazard arc when the Straw Hats are partying. Luffy's about to go ham on Sanji's feast that he prepared, and he says, "Now time for Gum Gum Eater," and then starts eating a bunch of food. Like I said, we see Luffy eat a bunch of food countless times throughout the series, but this is the only time he said it as like a fighting move. Which Forgotten Luffy technique was your favorite? Comment down below. Also subscribe. Anyways, peace out.